Well, for ages, we've heard this ad nauseum from Blackout Bowen about Australia's transition to net zero.
We have an exciting future going forward in terms of green hydrogen.
Of course, we'll be leading the global green hydrogen revolution.
And what we know is that the green hydrogen sector has an enormous potential in this country.
We have $225 billion pipeline for green hydrogen in Australia.
My government sees enormous potential in green hydrogen.
Only Labor has the plan to ensure that Australia is part of and is leading that hydrogen revolution.
What a farce, because this week we've learnt that our nation's biggest green hydrogen project has completely collapsed, with Queensland's Crisafulli government withdrawing funding. So, are Albo and Bowen's green dreams now dead with this latest development? Joining me are two people who are more to the ideological left than I am, a little bit more. New South Wales Greens MP Abigail Boyd and former Press Secretary to Prime Minister Julia Gillard and founding partner of Watson Advisory Darren Barnett. Thank you both for coming on. Abigail, I'll kick off with you first. Net zero is a fantasy now, isn't it? We cannot reach it in this country. We can't have green hydrogen and you won't have nuclear. So what are we going to do instead?
Yeah, look, net zero is something that we will achieve eventually.
How?
I absolutely accept that we've had some setbacks when it comes to green hydrogen, but most of that is because we don't have the market certainty that we need. And that's been a product of, the governments of the times flip-flopping and not sending the right signals. We are on track, like it or not. We're getting more and more renewables into the grid. Power bills are going down. We are seeing it. It's not happening as quickly as we would like, but it is definitely happening. And we will get these little blips, but we need to be nimble. We need to work with industry to make sure that we get these things on track.
Well, Abigail, I'll come back to you. I suggest you're living in a fantasy world. But Darren, Moody's are already warning that, unlike what Abigail has just said, consumers are in for higher electricity prices, up by 45 to 65% in the future. It's a fantasy. When are Labor going to realise that they are destroying businesses and destroying the poorer people that Labor is supposed to represent, making their lives a living hell? When are you going to own up to it, Darren?
There will be a point in time, Rowan, and I know what you're going to say, so just let me finish, but there will be a point in time where liquid fuels that propel everything from ships to vehicles to generators, there will be a liquid fuel that is not based on petroleum products and hydrocarbons. It's a question of when that will occur. Now, Labor's investing to try to make that come forward as soon as possible, whereas others would prefer to utilise current resources that we have, but pollute the environment. So it's always a balancing act of when do you get this technology online, how do you provide the research and development funding for it to occur, and that transition needs to be as smooth as possible. There will be volatility in the prices of everything in the energy sector in the meantime. You get unexpected events such as the war in Ukraine that pushed up gas prices in Europe, therefore
Darren, I've got to jump in there, mate. Mate, listen, seriously, there's a bridge behind you right there and a building that I could sell both of you if you believe a single word of what you just said. It was all claptrap. No one believes that there's ever going to be some magical gas or whatever that you're going to pull out of nowhere. We have nuclear energy, which we could be using. We have the greatest resources of coal. We have gas. We have it all here. They're all here, Darren. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth. But Abigail, you claim... Sorry,
what we
Abigail.
have here, Rowan, hang on very quickly.
Sorry, no, I want to go to Abigail. You've had your chance and I didn't interrupt. You've had your chance, I didn't interrupt. I want to go to Abigail now because Abigail says we're going to get to net zero. That's great, Abigail, but what's the point? Because the rest of the world is not going to net zero. The US has said no to Paris Agreement. China, India, Indonesia, none of them are going to net zero. So the reality is you're living in cloud cuckoo land because you're taking us down a path that the rest of the world is never going to go to. China accounts for 60% of the world's carbon emissions. We account for less than 2%. So we're wasting our time, Abigail.
Right.
You're driving people into poverty.
There's a lot in that I would take issue with. But let's just look at energy prices. When you look at energy prices...
No, I've asked you about why we're going to net zero. Why do we bother? What is the point?
Why do we bother? Because it's, thankfully, it's not even just about the environment anymore. It's not just about climate. It's about energy prices.
And what is the point of Australia getting to net zero?
Well, if we get to net zero, we are doing our bit to actually, avert catastrophic climate change.
But nobody else is, Abigail. Nobody else is.
Yeah,
it's great that you're doing it, but nobody else is doing it.
Yeah,
so
well,
what's
if we
the
took
point?
that approach to everything in the world,
no, we're not taking that approach to everything. We're taking that approach to climate change. So why are we bothering?
Energy prices, because they're
that's
coming
not what
down
I asked about. I've asked you why we're going to net zero.
Care about?
Why?
They care about energy prices.
No,
and renewables are pushing energy prices down as soon as we get that coal.
Not according to Moody's, they're not. So you've just told us a falsehood. According to Moody's, they're pushing them up.
No, that's not true at all. The way the energy market works in Australia is a reverse
or more
auction.
importantly, when will these energy prices come down, Abigail? Because they've gone up and up. I've seen my bill, they go up and up. Because
of coal and gas. They are the way that the energy market works in Australia is that it's basically the highest cost. The highest cost input is what we then end up paying as our entire energy bill. The more renewables come on, the less, the more quickly we move unreliable coal off of the grid, the more quickly that we get rid of the really expensive gas. You will see those energy prices coming down. We're already seeing it. It's something that's
So Abigail, okay, I'm going to take you at your word. So you're convinced, I don't think the Australian public are buying it because we heard $275 from Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese ad nauseum. So your idea is we're going to get to net zero even though you can't explain why we need to. It's just a nice thing to do. And prices are going to come down. That's what you said. And prices are going to come down.
The climate just that little bit
but
less
it's not, because China's at 60% emissions. It's not going to make a jot of difference to the global. But that is the truth, Abigail. If you can't recognise that, you can't add up. It's that simple. Let's go to Darren.
I'm looking at the actual facts.
Can you give me some reality, Darren? Because you keep claiming there's this mythical gas that you're going to have that's going to do these wonderful things. Why does the Labor Party support impoverishing businesses, driving small businesses to the wall? Why does the Labor Party support the poorest people having to turn off the air conditioning or to turn off the heating or not being able to afford to live the comfortable lives they used to live? Why?
Well, if you can find a way for business to embrace long-duration storage,
you're not answering my question. Why does the Labor Party support impoverishing? No, answer the question. Why? Why?
I am answering the question. I am saying that if you have enough long-duration storage, then households won't have to compete for that energy and prices will come down. Irrespective of where that energy comes from, it's a simple supply-demand equation. And that's what will occur if you're able to take pressure off the grid by businesses and other big electricity and power users being off the grid and behind the meter. If you can do that, inevitably the prices will come down because there's less competition for resources.
Darren, I asked you a why and your response was an if. Twice you mentioned if you do this, if you do this. In other words, you didn't answer the question. Thank you, Abigail. You did at least answer my questions. Thank you, Darren. And listen, if you guys want to carry on, we'll chat about it. There's lots more to chat about on this. I believe you're both living in fantasy land, but I'm happy to be convinced otherwise. Thanks a lot for coming on The World According to Rowan Dean.